Let's take garbage and make it shine. This whole project is asinine. Waste some time with me, I can guarantee this old junk will soon toe the line.
We're polishing turds. Mediocrity turd. I can't find the words. This song is absurd. We're polishing turds. We're polishing turds.
All right, real good stuff, doers. It's time to tidy up a few loose ends on Cody's small block. Welcome back to the most exciting television show of all time with the best ridiculously long intros breaking all the rules of YouTube. Anyhow, let's look at rotating some and see what it is to start with. We've got it's a small block Chevrolet, and it's we have this comes from Ohio crankshaft. It's a forged crankshaft, 3750 stroke. This thing still has 350 mains. We're not changing the block out on this thing. And with a 3750 stroke, it's not the end of the world. The biggest thing that's not unique, but a little different about this crankshaft from maybe your standard small block is that it has a big block snout on the end here, right? One of the weaknesses of a small block Chevrolet is the snout, or the post as the crank guys call it, is very small. It's one of the smaller ones, and they are bad to break. And a blower application is really hard on that. So a blower crank, generally we use a big block snout, and that usually fixes that problem. And that's what this one has. All right, we got a Comp Star. This is their heavy H-beam, which they claim will do like 2,000 horsepower. That's a beefy piece. It's not these super light H-beams. It's the opposite of that. Super stout. All right, the piston is a custom diamond, gas ported, done kind of to my specs, and it's a really sharp piece. It really looks nice, and I think it'll hold up to what we need it to do. It's not the lightest piece, but that's not what we want in something like this. We want some mass to manage these pressures and forces, and keep doing it pass after pass. Because of where our wrist pin is located, it's moved up in the piston basically because from the extra stroke, right? We have buttons to locate our oil ring. Buttons do a lot of things. One, they're real easy to change out, but in this case they're going to help locate our oil ring. They keep the wrist pin from coming out, kind of like spiral lock, but a different way of doing it. And on a lot of drag race type engines, you're going to see these. They work great. Wrist pin. These are trends. As you can see, they are beefy, right? They're heavy duty to handle all that blower pressure, and hopefully stay straight, and also help keep the piston bore straight. Same thing. If you put a skinny or a standard wrist pin in something like this, it is not long for this world. It will break, and usually that failure is not one you want to be a part of. Total seal rings, AP stainless top. This is what we use constantly around here. Almost all the time we use these things. It's an Napier second, which is pretty common nowadays. They used to be kind of rare, now they're everywhere. Regular oil rings, these are standard tension deals. And this is our ring bridge, and that's what when you have a wrist pin through here, you have to have something to keep this stuff all in line, to keep that button from turning and such, and that's what that ring bridge is for. So now the next thing we need to do with this stuff is balance it, right? So the first thing we've got to do is get our computer and our scale in here and figure out the bob weight so that we can put our bob weight together and get it on the balancer and spin this thing and see what it's going to require to balance. All right, we've got our crank up in our mill mount balancer. Bob weights are on. Bob weights just simulate the weight of our bob weight of your rotating assembly. And you know, normally your piston and rod are going to come up here, and crankshaft has a counterweight on it to counteract those forces. And you want to match the weight of this to the weight of that. And the way we do that is with the crankshaft balancer, and we use these bob weights to simulate that weight. So what we need to do now, over here, we've got a computer that runs our program for this. I'm gonna spin this thing, and we'll see what happens here. All right, that's it. And that's saying we've got some imbalance here and here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in where the counterweights are at on this crankshaft. You see we start in one here in front, and we go here to zone setup. Begin. End. Now we put that counterweight up. It's up over here, so now that makes sense. Same here. Begin. End. All right, now that tells us where we need, in this case we have to add metal, which always sucks, but that's the way it is sometimes, especially in this world, because in the boosted big power world we often deal with heavy bob weights, and that means putting Mallory in crankshaft. There's no way around it. So we're going to have to put a 1/2 inch slug right here, and then back here a 1 inch slug right here. So we're probably going to have to mill away a little bit of spot right here so we can make room to get our 1 inch slug back here. And then after that we'll have to drill off just a little bit to compensate, because that'll overbalance it a little bit, and we'll drill a little bit back off to get back in, and we should get down to zero pretty quick. And that'll be that for balancing. But let's get some metal in this thing and see what that process looks like. You'll notice these speakers here are only for rock and roll. There's never been any country music come through these things at all, period. And yeah, let's put some metal in. of the other important things we got to do before we clean this thing and get it ready to assemble is we've got to check stroker clearance. We're adding stroke to this block, and we've got to make sure that everything clears now before we clean it. So basically what that means is I got to jump this crank up in the block and slide a rod and piston in around every hole and see how things shape up. Sometimes you got to clearance a little bit to make it all work, and the only way to do that is to mock it up. All right, got a crankshaft in here. It turns freely, of course, and I got one rod and piston in here, and it's probably our point of closest contact, and we're plenty good. I've got probably at least 1/8 of an inch no matter where I turn this thing, and that's basically because this is a Brodix block, and if you'll notice there's basically a cast in relief right there, stroker clearance relief. It's already there. If this were a stock style block, this would be filled in and we would be grinding right now. But this thing's not crazy stroke, 3750 stroke, and looks like we got plenty everywhere. I can't see any reason why these would be different. Forwards, on a forward, you got your oil pump up here. You also need to put your pump on here and see what's going on there, because it's pretty common to get into the pump, need to grind the pump or something, or you can even get into underneath the pump. You can have problems over here. Chevrolet's not like that generally. So it looks like we're in good shape, but you always have to check, because you don't want to start putting this thing together after you've cleaned it up and then run into that. All right, so clearance is good. Now it's on to our next problem. All right, the next hurdle that we have to cross here are cylinder heads. We dug the original O-rings out. Sometimes when you're doing a project like this, you're kind of stuck with some of the original architecture, or at least it's easiest to kind of stay or modify the original thing and not necessarily do it how you would from scratch. A lot of times I'll put the O-ring in the block and receiver groove in the head, and the reason I do that is if somebody has torches ahead or something, it's much easier to repair. And anyhow, that's not how this was from the get-go, so that complicates things. So what I did is I pulled the 40 wire out, and now I want to go back and put a 50 wire in. In this case, there's plenty of room to do that, assuming that the receiver groove here, or the O-ring groove, is in a usable spot for me. We didn't do this originally, so hopefully I'm going to use our O-ring fixture here to do this. And the complication that can come up is if who knows how they put this in there, and if it's in some weird location or whatever, it can give us trouble, but hopefully it won't. And we can use our O-ring fixture here, and we'll go slightly wider and a little deeper, and that'll get us back to a fresh, clean situation where we can start installing wire. So let's take a look at that. that got our O-ring situation back in order. It's ready to accept 50 thousandths O-ring. That was kind of a finger cross type deal, a little tedious because of the previous O-ring situation. So when you're set up like this, it's really difficult. Like, it's impossible to go back the same size because you'll never get it set up exactly concentrically with the existing O-ring. So the way I fix this is by going bigger and hoping that 5 thousandths either side will cover everything. And in this case, it did. So the gamble paid off. Now we'll transfer that to the block for our receiver groove. This should go fairly smoothly. And then our O-ring situation, other than actually making the wires, will be done. That's about enough bull mess for one day. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the intake manifold. We'll do some pretty heavy modifications to that thing to get it ready for big boost and RPM. Merch is available at HarrellEngine.com. Like, share, subscribe, or suffer the repercussions. We'll see you next time. Whatever. Who cares?
Mediocrity care. I can't find the words. This song is absurd. We're polishing turds. We're polishing turds.